Welcome to this explainer. Today we're unraveling a truly gripping medical mystery. We're talking wartime desperation, decades of relentless scientific detective work, and an invisible enemy that just completely flipped our understanding of global health upside down. We're going to trace the fascinating discovery of the Hantan virus and explore how a single hard-fought scientific breakthrough unlocked a whole new world of viral threats that are actually still making headlines right now. So let's get right into it.
Okay, let's dive into this. Picture this. It's the early 1950s and the Korean War is raging. But right in the middle of the artillery fire and combat, a silent, totally unseen killer enters the fray. Out of nowhere, thousands of United Nations soldiers are struck down by a terrifying mystery illness. And these weren't combat wounds, right? They were suddenly coming down with severe hemorrhagic fever and acute renal failure. This wasn't just a couple of isolated cases either. We're talking about more than 3,000 soldiers falling critically ill to an enemy that no one could see, no one could fight, and honestly, no one could even name.
Part 1. The Korean War Mystery. An invisible killer in the trenches.
To really grasp the sheer panic this caused, you gotta picture the desperate situation on the ground. These soldiers were living in muddy, cramped, rat-infested trenches, basically the absolute perfect breeding ground for disease. Suddenly, a soldier would spike a massive fever, and that would be followed by severe internal bleeding and ultimately acute kidney failure. Military doctors were completely baffled. Because medical experts literally couldn't isolate a known bacteria or virus in their labs, wild theories started spreading like wildfire through the camps. Was it some kind of new biological weapon, an undiscovered chemical toxin, or just a totally unknown pathogen hiding out in the local environment? The medical community was effectively fighting completely in the dark.
Part 2. Hunting the Invisible Killer. Enter Dr. Ho-Wang Lee's quest. You know, every good mystery needs a brilliant detective, and ours is South Korean virologist Dr. Ho-Wang Lee. While the rest of the world kind of moved on after the war ended, this disease, which they were calling Korean Hemorrhagic Fever at the time, just kept plaguing the local populations. Now, Dr. Lee, armed with his epidemiology expertise, came up with a pretty critical hypothesis. He believed this wasn't a weapon, wasn't a chemical, but a naturally occurring disease originating from animals, specifically the local rodents. What makes his quest so incredible is the sheer, undeniable perseverance it took. Look at that massive gap on the timeline. For over 20 years, this virus was basically a ghost. Fast forward to the 1970s, and Dr. Lee takes his hunt right into the heavily militarized demilitarized zone, the DMZ, capturing wild rodents. This was incredibly dangerous, grueling fieldwork. At one point, he was actually detained by soldiers who thought he was a spy. But his persistence paid off. In 1976, his team finally found a viral antigen in the lung tissue of those captured mice. And then 2 years later, in 1978, the virus was officially isolated. The ghost finally had a face.
Part 3. The Striped Field Mouse. The perfect host and the tiny culprit behind decades of suffering.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the isolated virion we see here, extracted directly from the lung tissues of the striped field mouse. This little creature, scientifically known as Apodemus agrarius, acts as the perfect asymptomatic reservoir for the disease. The mouse carries the virus, replicates it, and sheds it constantly, all without ever getting sick itself. Pretty wild, right? Once Dr. Lee isolated this specific pathogen, he obviously needed to name it. Because the crucial infected mice were captured near the Hantan River in South Korea, he named his monumental discovery the Hantavirus. So this microscopic structure right here was the exact pathogen that had literally brought thousands of soldiers to their knees.
But wait, how did it actually get from the mouse to the soldiers? This discovery caused a massive paradigm shift in virology. See, at the time, viruses in this broader family were thought to be transmitted mostly by insects, like mosquitoes or ticks. But the hantavirus, it doesn't need an insect bite at all. Check out this sequence. Step 1. The mouse excretes the virus in its urine or feces. Step 2. Out in the environment, like on the floor of a trench or a barn, this excrement dries out and turns into dust. Step 3. A human walks by or maybe sweeps the floor, kicking that dust right up into the air. And finally, step 4. The human unknowingly inhales this aerosolized viral dust, and boom, the infection begins. It is an incredibly stealthy mode of transmission.
Part 4. A new world of viruses. Let's move to and see how this builds.
So Dr. Lee didn't just solve a 20-year-old cold case. He unknowingly unlocked the door to an entire global family of viruses. Once scientists actually knew what to look for, they realized similar viruses were hiding out in rodent populations all over the globe. Fast forward with me to 1993, to the Four Corners region of the United States. Out of nowhere, perfectly healthy young adults start collapsing with a mysterious, highly fatal lung illness. It looked absolutely nothing like the kidney failure seen back in the Korean War. Public health officials were, understandably, terrified. But by utilizing the foundational knowledge from Dr. Lee's work, scientists very quickly identified the culprit. It was a brand new type of hantavirus which they named the Sinombre virus. This specific outbreak was driven by an El Niño climate shift. Basically, massive rainfall led to an explosion in vegetation, which then caused a huge boom in the local deer mouse population. And, as we know, more mice meant a lot more virus in the dust.
And this brilliantly illustrates a stark divide within the virus family. We now classify them into Old World and New World hantaviruses. The Old World viruses, like the original Hantan virus found in Asia and Europe, primarily attack the kidneys. They cause what's called hemorrhagic fever with renal syndrome. Crucially, though, they are strictly transmitted from mouse to human. But the New World variants found in the Americas, like Sinombre and the Andes virus, well, they behave very differently. They go straight for the lungs, causing hantavirus pulmonary syndrome, which comes with a staggering mortality rate. And most alarmingly, certain New World strains possess a terrifying capability that the Old World strains just don't have.
Part 5. The modern hantavirus threat. The MV hondulius outbreak.
So, the crucial point is that this viral family is far from a thing of the past. To really understand the modern threat, we have to look at a highly alarming, very recent event that turned a luxury expedition into an absolute quarantine nightmare. The culprit? The Andes virus. Endemic to South America, the Andes virus is the terrifying rule breaker of the hantavirus family. While almost all hantaviruses hit a dead end in humans, the Andes virus is the only one documented to be capable of human-to-human transmission. Now, it is exceedingly rare, and it usually only happens between people in very close, prolonged proximity. But just the fact that it can spread directly between humans at all makes it a massive public health concern, especially when you're talking about enclosed environments.
And an enclosed environment is exactly where it struck. April 2026. The cruise ship MV Hondius departs Argentina heading for Antarctica, but shortly after, a severe outbreak begins. The toll is devastating. 3 deaths and 8 suspected cases on board. The World Health Organization steps in and confirms our worst fears. It's the Andes virus strain. Because of how rapidly it spread in the confined spaces of the ship, rare human-to-human transmission was heavily suspected between the passengers and the crew. The situation escalated so fast that the ship was literally denied entry to the Canary Islands. The authorities were just too afraid for the local population's safety.
So you're probably asking, how on earth did an ancient rodent virus get onto a modern luxury cruise ship? Well, epidemiological investigators traced the entire outbreak back to the index case, the very first patient.
It turned out to be a Dutch tourist who, right before boarding the Hondius, had spent 4 months on a rural birdwatching road trip across Chile, Uruguay, and Argentina. Out there in the wild, interacting with the natural habitat of the local rodents, that's where the zoonotic leap occurred. This whole scenario perfectly illustrates how our modern love for ecotourism and global travel can instantly transport a pathogen from a remote forest trail directly into a crowded, highly globalized setting.
From the muddy trenches of the Korean War to a modern cruise ship in the Atlantic, the story of the Hantan virus is just such a powerful lesson in One Health. That's the undeniable, invisible connection between human health, animal ecosystems, and our ever-changing environment. Dr. Lee's incredible discovery taught us that the next major global health threat might not announce itself with a giant bang, right? It might just be quietly hiding in the dust we kick up. As we continue to push further and further into wild habitats, the ultimate question really remains: are we looking close enough? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and as always, keep your curiosity sharp.